Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Spring One's Agile Leadership Track. Our next speaker is Adam DeFelice with Operational Transformation, Teacher's Journey from App Surfers to VMware Tanzu.
Hi, everybody. My name is Adam DeFelice. I'm a DevOps engineer at Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. I'm here to showcase our operational journey that we went through to move off of WebSphere and onto our new Tanzu Application Service platform. And I feel like watching a journey could be pretty unrelatable. You sign up hoping you have a similar stack to the presenter, or perhaps maybe a similar size. And if not, well, you're kind of stuck in a presentation with someone like me who's going to probably crack a few bad jokes. So instead, I thought I would relate it to something maybe you've been through, a personal journey, something that other people have been through, and that's an analogy of going to the gym. Have you ever Googled anything about fitness? There's just so many people's journeys and so many personal experiences about what works for them. But a good question, is how do you know what works for them will work for me? Some of the very minimal, while others just seem so intense. Which ones do I choose? What equipment am I going to need? Which things can I live without? And then you get to the meal plans. I remember learning about the food triangle in elementary school. Is that still relevant? Do I just need to eat veggies and that'll help? I also heard the keto diet is the new rage, but should I try something that's so new? Is that proven? What about the Mediterranean diet? I know that one's been around a little longer. Maybe it's more reliable. Well, let's take those same questions about the gym and that gym journey and apply it instead to cloud computing. How do I know the exercises that'll work for me? How do I take something that's so new and trendy? Or instead, should I take something that's a little bit more reliable and that's been proven out? What equipment do I need? Which things can I live without? There's just so many small details that you can look through. And although you can do your research, sometimes it just makes things even more confusing. The advice I would like to give is first thing you need to do after your research to answer these questions is to kind of take the leaps. You're allowed to take more than one. You can do several different POCs, but getting the hands-on experience can be very helpful, whether it's going to any different cloud provider, or in the case that we had done a POC using micro PCF at the time. But enough about me. Let's take a look at teachers. And I like to take a step back. And what did teachers look like at the start of November 2018? Well, we can paint a picture together. First, our company's been here with about 150 microservices, spread out with about 50 of them being on WebSphere and 100 of them being on our Tomcat servers. Next, we got our dev teams and our partners. So we have about 40 developers and 30 QAs that my DevOps team here supports. Now, on the flip side of the stack, we have an outsourced operations team that manages our servers, network, middleware, and oversees pretty much all of our operations. Some key components here is our IaaS layer being on vSphere and our load balancer, F5. Our operation teams does all the managing and supporting for these platforms for us. Next comes something that I like to give a lot of credit to, which is our foundational year. So our business had actually given us a year to primarily focus on upgrading infrastructure, applications, and reducing technical debt. That way we'd be able to come back in 2020 with a quicker turnaround time on feature requests, enhancements, and things like mean time to recovery. We were actually able to allocate about 50% of our dev team to this foundational year. Next, for the lack of a good pun, we'll paint myself into this picture. I had started off as Java dev, but I'd been on the DevOps team for 2 years at the start of 2018. So for me personally, I did have some elevated access in production, but not enough to see everything, and never mind doing write access to make changes. My DevOps team, size 2 at the time, and the other person was pretty brand new to the team. So when it came to operations, well, kind of looked like this. I have had no networking experience. And to me, navigating vSphere, honestly, was just putting a square peg into a round hole. So keep in mind, I want you to keep in mind as I talk about this presentation that I was coming from zero real experience in the operations world. Not that I knew nothing, but everything I did was kind of out of scope and required research and speaking within my team and things like that. So you can kind of think of, I started this project from scratch. And with the lay of the land set, I invite you to kind of join me on our adventure as we journey through teachers' operational transformation to going to cloud. Now, the transformation begins with a problem. And I will not say the problem was that we wanted to go cloud, because that was rather the solution. But instead, I want to make sure that we can identify the problems that actually led us to choosing Tanzu Application Service as our solution. So long ago, our applications would live together in harmony. Then all of that changed when an application would attack. And what do I mean by attack? Well, funny enough, not all of our apps had this written out mutual agreement that would live together, share the LAN, and be in peace and harmony. Things like resources, disk and CPU, memory, all that stuff was kind of hard to come by. So instead, if an application started to chew up disk space or start eating up more memory than it was supposed to, well, all of our apps on that server would be affected. This could cause anything from slowness to out of memory errors to even apps dying by the Linux out of memory killer. So we had a few problems, right? If we ever did have that luxury of, okay, this application's a big, heavy hitting one, and we actually want to get its own isolated system. Well, that isolated system did help to avoid that problem, but then we'd have to go through the paperwork of requesting a server, the meetings, DNS requirements, the actual build. On average for us, well, this might sound familiar for some of you guys because that took us about 3 to 6 weeks. Next, we were kind of locked into our vendor at WebSphere, so we had to use a lot of the platform capabilities. This did make it harder for us to migrate off of, but we wanted to kind of build a more dynamic, integratable system. Thirdly, scaling our services required a lot of not only network resources, but smart human planning to ensure that our app servers weren't overloaded. We would actually have to go into our F5, make sure add another resource to the pool, and try and make sure we're doing a lot of harder networking work that really needed to be done in our load balancer. Next, well, our logging, that was not very pretty. Our monitoring wasn't much better. And so for some of the reasons listed here, and a lot more not listed, our decision was made to go cloud. Inherently, this did lead us to picking Taz as it seemed like the right solution for us. This brings us to the beginning, November 2018, with our internal cloud being picked and POC'd. It was time to kind of put our team together that was going to tackle this project. Well, what did our team look like exactly? At the beginning, even starting from the infrastructure, it kind of looked like this. We had an architect, we had 2 DevOps resources, a networking resource, and a server team resource. That even included somebody from Pivotal to actually be there and help us answer a lot of questions week to week. What I didn't know at the time was that this ability to include developers and albeit some DevOps resources in our design from the beginning to end was a big game changer for us. And let me explain why. So a good example was where we struggled in the past, and that was our management of WebSphere. We would always continuously hold off on these WebSphere upgrades because somehow we just made that product super painful to operate. Every time we did an upgrade across our environments, whether it be dev, UAT, stage, production, each one felt different. As we moved our upgrade closer and closer to prod, well, we would run into issues that didn't really exist in our lower environments. It almost made each one feel unique. And considering our upgrades consisted of a team of devs, testers, a PM, operators, this took months. This ended up costing the company tens of thousands of dollars just to upgrade our system. And our operational team at the start of 2019 had just adopted Ansible. And this was for all those same reasons we just mentioned. We want to make sure that we realize the value of ensuring our environments were similar from dev to prod. And that has nothing to do to also the speed automation would give us. So when it came to solving this problem for Taz, well, we took the momentum of Ansible and we got the agreement to build our platform using the what was called the Pivotal Platform Operation. So what this was, for lack of a better word, was a pivotal moment that we didn't really quite get because this was actually our very first time we were going to be going through building a whole platform from beginning to end using automation, which would involve us syncing our environments. This work ultimately fell to the DevOps team, which let them not just fill the role of dev, but also fill that ops part of their title. And what does that quite mean for us? Well, we shifted by putting DevOps into a role that we kind of had in our company, but we're never really quite able to identify. We never actually pointed our finger saying, this is something we need. What did help us saying that platform operator role was something we need was a document. Funny enough, this document came from Pivotal and actually identified 3 different roles. One was to manage the apps manager of Taz, one was to manage the ops manager, and the last one was to manage the underlying storage, things like ESX host and network. This pretty much translated to an app admin, a platform admin, and an infrastructure admin. That's what we used in kind of putting development behind the installation of the platform, partnered up with a few people from operations, and turning that into code really was that shift that didn't know we needed that actually pushed us into this wheels in motion people call the DevOps culture. At the same time, we had the configuration as code infrastructure being set up for us. The apps team kicked off at the start of 2019, and they had put a team together of 7 very capable developers and 5 QA to work on a migration from our apps from WebSphere to the new platform. Now, if you recall, I said we had about 50 applications on WebSphere at this time. So moving this would be no easy feat, especially since as part of this migration, they took that internal queuing and caching that the platform had given us and took it and externalized it and migrated to Redis and Artemis. Now, although in itself the app migration aspect is very interesting, you could do a whole 30 minutes on that, I want to key in on some of the operational journey points that they actually helped us with. That's right, we use our developers to really enhance our operational experience. We were planning to touch all of our brownfield apps. Pretty much the oldest things we had in our company all lived in WebSphere. And it felt like we were fortunate enough to say, hey, if we started writing all of our apps from scratch, what would we choose? What would we fix? And how? What came out of this question was a shared jar, which we had pretty much had for most of our things, but most is never really good enough. Instead, we took things that we had considered, hey, this is nice to have, and turned it into a must have. We said, hey, if you want to move to this new platform, you must have a checklist. And some of those things including a Spring Boot. So we had decided all of our apps that we're going to move over were going to be on Spring Boot, or if they were already on Spring Boot, they were going to be upgraded to Spring Boot 2. Pulled in our actuator dependencies. So we implemented a lot of things. Getting the nice version of health checks was great, but this actually helped us promote a lot of monitoring solutions and give us metrics into our apps that we had never really had before. So now that we had Prometheus up and running, we were actually able to use some dashboards and give us a lot more natural integration. 3, we enhanced our logging. This was a big one for us because I'm not sure if many of you are here familiar with WebSphere logs, but they log grouped up by cluster. So multiple apps had actually logged to the same file. So based on a log, possibly there was a chance you didn't even know which one it belonged to. Our logs didn't have a standardized format to them, and sometimes I'd open up and see 4 different loggers in one application. Well, I can't even tell you the amount of times I would open up a terminal, maybe 2, maybe 4, you name it, however big the cluster was, open up that log file, hit tail, send my request just to see what was going on. So by enhancing our logging experience, we were actually able to implement this and get some Elastic integration and really have everything kind of trending in. The integration of the platform made this really easy. Lastly, we implemented tracing. This one's kind of interesting because this is one that, although we've implemented it on everything going in, we've yet to actually find it fully useful. So although Sleuth and Zool have been really, really good, and it's not like they're causing us issues, we put this on 50 services. We have 150. So once our tracing hits one of those services that have been blocked, well, we've kind of lost that value of tracing. So we might see it go through 1, 2, maybe 3 apps before it gets hit within one of the apps that don't have tracing on it. So this is something that we're investing into, and we do think that this will pay off. But it's good to see that we're not just done quite yet. So the app transformation is going on, the infrastructure transformation is going on. Fast forward us April 1st, and we're 2 weeks into launching our first app in production. April 15th was our estimated launch date. So life's good. We have the apps, our infrastructure is up and running, application's been tested, we're good to go. It's been run in dev. Well, kinda, sorta. Who knows, really? We have never set up a private cloud before. This is really the first time where we said, we really want to get that validation that everything we're doing was correct. We had Pivotal helping us the whole time as they were kind of on our team and there to answer a lot of questions. But sometimes you just don't know what questions to ask. And for this reason, we actually decided to bring in professional services for 3 weeks to really help us go over everything. To relate back to the metaphor of starting to go back to the gym, well, I bought my gym pass, been to the gym a few times, looked around, saw what people are doing, copied their exercises, but I didn't really know if I was doing everything right. And, I didn't really know all the exercises I can do. I was kind of just copying what other people did. And let's be fair, I could be doing the exercises wrong. And if you're doing something wrong, with lifting heavy weights, a very big chance that you're probably going to hurt yourself. So rather than us shooting ourselves in the foot, we decided that we would go ourselves, get that personal trainer to actually watch our form and teach us those exercises that we didn't know. What was actually cool during our engagement, which I'd like to point out that really thought helped us, was we didn't actually let our professional services put their hands on the keyboard. Everything was done by us and driven by us. And again, back to the gym metaphor, if your personal trainer is lifting the weights for you, you're not going to get the results that you're looking for from your gym. So instead, what we would do is professional services guiding us, we sat with all the correct parties at a table. This included devs, DevOps, ops, you name it. I found when we got to the spot, our team, including a lot of the operation, we started to ask those questions that we would historically ask in the past. Things like, how many resources does our VM need? How do you come up with that number? How many VMs do we need? How do we make our system highly available? How do we monitor the platform? What happens if a server goes down? How do we do disaster recovery? I can go on. But I'm sure at this point, you've heard these questions in the past. And these are very valid questions. Don't discredit any of these. These are things we need to care about with every single server that we put up in our company and every single platform that gets built on top of it. Especially with all of us, the future of us going cloud, we really want to start worrying about the cost because we just start spinning things up left, right, and center. Who knows how much it's going to cost? But the beauty was because of all this platform work, it actually did a lot of the HAing for us. We didn't have to worry about something being highly available. We didn't have to worry about a lot of these questions. It was pretty much almost hands off the platform and rather became us becoming an education process of, okay, it says it does this. How does it do that? So instead of us implementing, it was more of us learning. This even led to us experimenting. As what we would like to do is, as promised something, we wanted to learn it. So we would actually validate the assurance of the platform and use that as our education. With all of that up, running, and tests kind of run, you're actually able to get that stamp of operational readiness that we look for. So when I think of our operational journey, it was kind of interesting because all this work that we would typically do, we really see differed with this platform. The people management costs and time to set up that operational readiness became very minimal. And day to day, since our go live, it will be minimal. So our ops team didn't really have to get their hands dirty with a lot of the things they typically would have to get this thing ready. That's because Taz had it all ready for us. So although we might have just as many VMs as we had prior to the migration as we do now, we have the benefit of not really having to look at them day to day. And in fact, when we do look at them, the platform monitoring was just enough for us to actually say, hey, look, these things are healthy because it already told us the things that we cared about. With the health check still ongoing and our vendor on site, it took us to April 15th. This is the day we had planned to go live. With the platform up, running, validated, made a few changes during the health check that really helped the performance. Teachers, well, we had just gone live with our first application successfully. Now, during this, I thought this would be a lot of fun because we had the developers implement a lot of observability. So we had all these dashboards and all these metrics. There was a bunch of eyes staring at a screen. Our load balancer, we were looking at the F5 to make sure that was going to work. We had vSphere opened up. Oh, how's our servers going to react? All these people, all these eyes, all this excitement. And wow, that was boring. It was one of the most anticlimactic releases I've ever seen in my life. And boy, was that make me excited. It was a very boring live release, but we were up, we were live, and we were receiving traffic in production. And that was it. We had the pattern. We had our applications up. We knew what we were doing for the migration. We had our operational kind of readiness ready. And we continued to follow that same pattern for each application as we transitioned it from WebSphere all the way into Taz. So that kind of translates us to today. We've done that 55 times. So what does that really look like to us now? What benefits are we starting to see? Well, now with all the observability implemented, things like Logstash, Prometheus are really at our disposal. So before, developers, when they wanted to see their logs in production, we had to retrieve the logs from something that would sync to a file share, and that sync happened every 5 minutes. So you couldn't actually see any live requests going through. Well, this is where you can see all those tools that we have now coming in handy. And let's say we wanted to see metrics. Well, we'd normally have to bring in someone from our operational team to be able to share their screen, SSH in, and show us a bunch of the things we wanted to see as devs. Having these capabilities being self-service for our devs really put the insight and ownership a little bit more onto the developers' hands than the operators. This lets the operation team focus a little bit more on their important infrastructure work versus things like helping the devs manage things they should be able to see themselves. From a networking perspective, well, we went from having to make a DNS request that would bind us to specific IPs, ports, making it very limited and restrictive, to us simply going in our files, bumping the number of instances up by one, and going through our deployment pipeline. Build requests that would normally take us 3 to 6 weeks between the meetings, the building, the networking, and all the other aspects of getting a VM all together manually, well, all of a sudden, they just went down from weeks to minutes. And I'll say that again. They went down from weeks to minutes. Again, this is another showing of how we can free up our operations team to let them focus on their more important work. Redis, it was pretty much the same button click. They would go into the UI, click they wanted it, and they got it with the click of a button. Software as a service. So along with all these capabilities, we got to also implement a new deployment pipeline. So now that we actually had all this new controlling using routing, using automation, we were able to implement zero downtime deployments that also included some smoke chests in the middle of our pipeline. For our run team, well, they have all the benefits you'd get from going containers, except the headache of building, testing, securing, and deploying that container. So all those things you would normally have to worry about, again, this is where we took advantage of the platform. And this is not to mention the self-healing capabilities that Tanzu gave us that if our apps did manage to go down, they would automatically restart themselves. Our product upgrade team, well, the one that used to require PM, testers, and all that jazz, well, now that became a developer simply going in and editing code like they would do day to day. This would actually take less than a day to prepare and run within an environment. Now, I know that sounds great, but does this mean we've had no hiccups? Absolutely not. But in comparison with what we used to do, we'll just say things have been a lot easier from development all the way to the runtime of our application. So to summarize, our operational journey was really led by the capabilities of the platform. Being able to leverage the automation of our environments to containerized applications, to making a conscious decision to not just lift and shift our apps, but actually upgrade our applications and implement a lot of those nice to haves and turning those into must haves. These are the things that really paved the way and kind of got us going in our operational journey. Now, this may be a very biased DevOps thing to say, but I'm always a firm believer that your culture doesn't stem from a tool, but rather it comes from your pipelines. And leveraging the platform helped us build not just the app pipelines to give us a happier developer, but also helped us build the operational pipelines, which we had never had in the past, to give us that operational shift, evolving our DevOps culture, resulting in a happier operator. So where does this leave us? Is Taz just done? Well, we've been fortunate enough to not have to worry too much about the runtime of the environment. Again, this has brought us to focusing on some new capabilities of the platform. So we're still in the middle of exploring some auto-scaling capabilities, using some of the newer titles like Redis, or possibly even exploring config server. We're also still using the new features that the platform comes up with their upgrades, things like service meshes. That way we can continue down the rule of constant improvement. And to connect back to my analogy, now you can kind of think of, you've hit your goal. You've done your workouts, you've hit the health benefits of going to the gym. Now you can't just kind of stop working out and expect to keep all of those results. You can easily start to kind of start to get lazy and, start to possibly put on some pounds and lose some muscle. Hitting your goals is one thing, but you got to keep working at it. And this applies to the software development experience and operations, not only with Tanzu Application Service, but really, I'd say this is the key to success of all platforms in general. Thank you. And I do have.
Well, thank you, Adam. I love when technology is boring. When technology is exciting, usually something bad has happened. And I love that VMware and Pivotal at the time helped reveal things that you didn't know were important. And I got to tell you, platform architects, they're lifesavers. Yeah, sorry if we cut you off a little early, but don't forget to head over to the Slack channel for the Q&A with Adam, and maybe he can finish telling you what we cut him off saying.